Welcome back to the shop, everyone. This week's video takes place in week 1 of 2023, which is January 2nd to January 8th, and we are kicking off the new year where we left off in the last video. We've got 47 in the shop with us today, and he is going to help us pinning the cam and the crank wires into some Deutsch connectors. So as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm using my knife, I'm cutting back some of the outer sheath, and then I'm unbundling the wires. They've got a little like blue protective coat in them, and so yeah, cut back the sheath, cut back that plastic, expose all the wires. And then what we're going to need to do is strip the wires and put pins on all the wires to go into the Deutsch connector. You've seen me do this before. This is nothing new. Yeah, so I know for a fact in some of the upcoming videos they're going to be long like this one is, and that's because I've been spending quite a bit of time in the shop. I'm still trying to keep up on a weekly video for you guys, so managing being in the shop, actually working on the car and being on the computer, going through the videos, editing the videos, doing all the voiceovers, it's a lot of time. I mean, this video is I think over 2 hours long, and so I've got to watch the whole thing, edit it the first time, and then go back through and watch the entire thing the second time. So it takes a fair amount of time to put these together. And luckily right now we're middle of February and we've got a long weekend, so I've got time to be in the office. It's Sunday night today, and then I can be in the shop all day tomorrow and into the evening, or I can come into into the office in the afternoon if I feel like taking a break. So it's nice having these extra days off and having these long weekends. I also took Friday off just to have an extra long weekend, which was nice. Alright, so we have the cam and crank sensor pinned into the Deutsch connector, and that is connected into this distributor. So distributor is now wired. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to run a 4-gauge wire to my alternator, and this is going to charge the battery and feed the car while it's running. I'm running this wire over to the through panel stud that I have in the passenger side fender area or wheel well area on the back. Just trying to figure out, you know, the best way to route this, and best way to get it over into that area on the passenger side. Now that I have the length of alternator wire that I need, I'm going to pull the harness out of the car, and I'm going to pull that alternator wire out of the car. I've already cut it, and I believe I'm going to start attaching the alternator wire onto that harness. So I know that the alternator wire needs to go roughly where the water pump and air conditioning compressor pump wire harness goes, just a little bit past there. So that's what I've done. I've pulled the wire just a little bit past those connectors, and I'm starting to tape it up onto the existing harness. So that right there that I have in my hand is a heat shrink boot, and that is designed to go over top of the HD30 connector. So once I have all of this in loom, that will heat shrink the bundle to the connector, so it'll protect all of the wires from the elements and stuff. And so I'm just working my way up over all of the wires to where it needs to be. And what I'm doing is I'm pulling off the IAT connector right now. That's the intake air temperature connector. And what I'm doing is I am starting to pull is that the fuel injector connectors. Yeah, it's a fuel injector connector. So I'm starting to pull all the fuel injector connectors off. And I believe my intention here was the engine harness is done. I'm going to put loom and heat shrink over the entire harness. And so that's why I've started removing all of the connectors. And you won't really get a great view of it, but I did actually end up breaking a couple of the connectors. Fortunately, they're super cheap and I was able to pick up a few new ones, but it kind of sucks that I broke some of the plastic bits. What I'm doing right here is taking pictures of the harness, and that's probably so that I know how to put them back together, so I can go back and reference my pictures and see which wire goes where in the connector. with all the connectors off, I have separated just the fuel injector harness from the main engine harness. And you can see I grabbed some heat shrink there. I grabbed a few different sizes, a few different kinds, and I was kind of working over on the fab bench there, and then I thought to myself, man, wouldn't it be nice if I had a place that I could stand and work on this? And I realized, hey dumbass, you have a bench at the back of the shop. All you gotta do is clean it up, and then you can actually use the damn thing for its intended purpose. So yeah, I'm gonna clean up the bench so I can actually work on here in some comfort and not be limited to that small little bench. This is an 8-foot long bench. It's very nice to work on when it's clean, but it's also so easy to clutter up. Now the bench is actually in a bit of a usable state. We're going to start looming up this harness. So I'm going through and I'm finding the appropriate size of loom. I've got my label maker there at the far end. It's kind of sticking up out of its container. And what I'm doing right now is I am cutting off the tags on the fuel injector harness because it labels each cylinder 1 through 8. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting off the tag because I'm going to make my own labels for all of the injectors. That heat shrink is a little bit too small, so I'm just trying to find the right heat shrink size. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at what I just did is I looked at my ProWire order to see if I ordered the sizes that I thought I did, and I did. So I found the heat shrink that I was looking for. I forget where it was. You know, you can go back and rewind the video if you really want to see. But I was able to find what I was looking for, and what I'm doing right now is I am on my label maker making a heat shrink label in white. So that'll go over top of the black heat shrink and the black loom really nicely. And this heat shrink in this Rhino label maker is very temperamental. So in this case, I had printed out some labels before, and I came back out and I just printed a new label, and the whole thing jammed up. So I had to kind of pull the whole thing out. And the way this works is there's like a transfer film on the bottom, and it's separated from the actual heat shrink tube. And so, like an old cassette, I had to get a pencil in there and rewind it to tighten it all back up and get it back into place. And after that, it seems to be working fine. And what I'm doing right now is I'm going through and I'm printing out a bunch of the labels that I'm gonna need. So I think right now I'm just doing cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like getting labels for each of the cylinders. And as I said, that thing is temperamental, so you just saw I had to pull it back apart. But we're back printing, so we'll survive. As you can kind of see, there's a few more than just 8 labels there. I believe I printed out labels for all of the different sensors on the harness. So I did like the IAT, the oil temperature sensor, the intake air temperature sensor, fuel pressure sensor, coolant temperature and pressure sensor. So I think that's why there's so many labels. And what I'm doing here is I'm cutting the heat shrink down to the same size for each of the injectors. Actually, sorry, that's not heat shrink, that's loom I cut down, I believe. Right, because each of there's the main trunk, which splits into 4, and then each of those branches splits into 2 more branches, one for each injector. I was able to cut the wire loom down to the same size for each of the individual injectors. So I'm just using scissors and I'm cutting all of the heat shrink to roughly the same size using the scissors. So there we have the first injector. It's got heat shrink near the top holding the wire loom on, and I'm just sliding over the injector tag now and heat shrinking that on. So that's the start of the first one. We're gonna do that 8 more times. No, we're not. I lied to you. There's 8 injectors and I've already done one. So we're gonna do this 7 more times. each of the individual injectors are done, we can start those second branches, and that's just one big piece of loom, and then we take a piece of heat shrink and heat shrink between the one big branch and then the two small branches, and we do that 4 times because there's 4 of the first branches. So what I'm doing is, because the heat shrink and it might tighten up the wires a little bit, I just wanted to go back over to the engine and make sure that I haven't made the wires too short or too tight or anything like that. There's still lots of flexibility, and there is no issues, so I'm just going to press ahead. So what I'm trying to figure out now is that how do I do that last little bit, because it's like the main trunk and then there's branches coming out of it in several places. So I can't really heat shrink over top of it all that effectively, but I'm gonna find what heat shrink size I need. And I think either the camera died and I didn't notice, or there was maybe some corruption in a video file, because I'm going to put this down and then we're going to cut to a new video, and it looks like some more work has been done on that harness. A few things are moved around, but yeah, so right now I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I'm doing custom wiring on this car. So I bought some special parts for my classic Auto Air main brain, and I bought a new Molex connector, I bought new pins, I bought a bunch of stuff so that I can do all of the wiring for my heater like I've done on the rest of the car. The wire starts at the source, it ends at the device without any splices or ugliness in between. If I do need a splice, I'll throw a Deutsch connector on there, but in this case I really wanted the wires to go from the main box straight through without any splices or Deutsch connectors. So I'm getting set up to do an instructional video on like custom wiring, just a quick little thing on how you can, order parts and whatnot. It took me probably a good 2 to 3 hours of searching through parts and schematics to find exactly what I needed. It also took taking my digital calipers, measuring the sizes to make sure that when I think I found the right part, it is the right part. And I know from years ago when I built computers that those are Molex connectors on that unit, so I was able to go to Mauser.ca, search through some of their Molex parts, count the cavities, find the housing that matched the number of cavities that I have on my box, the power ratings, and then compare that to the schematics to find A, the housing that I need, and then B, the pins to go with this. And so now that I've got all those parts in, I can do some of that work. That out of the way, I can actually start on some of this wiring. So one of the first things that I need to do is I need to depin some of the wires from the harness. But before I do that, I want to take pictures of both sides. That way I know exactly where the wires go into the connector. This doesn't really come with a wiring schematic, so if I didn't take reference pictures, I would be completely in the dark after I pulled everything out. I would have no idea where any of it goes back, and that would be a real bad time. One of the things that I did, and you can kind of see it on the bench, is I bought a brand new power connector. And the reason why I did that is the wires that are in the existing power connector, they're expecting you to just splice into them. I don't want to do that. You can kind of see there's a fuse built into the line right in front of my camera there. There's a yellow fuse there. That's in line. I don't need that because I have my fuse box that all my power is going to come off of. And so I bought that power connector without realizing, well, dummy, you bought the tool to depin all this stuff. I can just depin the wires out of the existing power connector and replace them in the existing power connector. But I've got an extra one in case I ever need it in the future for any reason. Or in case I fuck this one up, I break it, or, you know, do something silly like that. So what I'm doing is I have depinned the connector that goes from the brain box there into the heater box itself, and that's going to activate all of the like vent doors and stuff to change it from defrost to floor to vent. And I'm just putting some loom on the wire just to dress it up. It had loom on it, but I want all of the loom in the car to be the same. I want it to be my loom. I want it, you know, heat shrink the way I want it done. And now that I've got that done, I am just repinning everything into the connector. And on my phone there, I've got the reference picture so that I know exactly where it goes. But before I do that, I kind of fucked up. I put the heat shrink way too close to the connectors, so I can't separate them out enough to actually put them into the harness. So what I have to do is cut the heat shrink that I already put on back off. And because this is a good heat shrink, it's got a glue on the inside, so when it heats up, the glue kind of expands and makes it really sticky. So that actually takes a fair amount of work to get this heat shrink off, so you kind of don't want to fuck it up, otherwise it's a pain in the ass. So I finally got the old stuff off, cut the wire loom back a little bit, and now I'm able to repin everything into the connector. Yep, so what I did there is I pinned everything into the connector, and then I ran the heat shrink up to the connector, heated it up, and you know, that's probably what I should have done in the first place, and probably what I'll do with the rest of my electrical stuff. Alright, so here we are. I got some fittings and some lines from Aeroflow in Australia. So I really wanted to do braided stainless air conditioning lines. I didn't want to do just your typical black rubber hydraulic high pressure. Aeroflow out of Australia was one of the companies I found who sells all of this stuff. There was another one that I could have got from Summit Racing, would have been a similar cost, but I really liked these guys' bulkhead connector, and there was a few other things that I really liked. It's all stainless, it's all polished, it's appears to be very, very nice stuff. So I'm just going through all of the parts, making sure I got everything I needed. I did my best to plan my route out ahead of time because they're so far away from me. I can't really just, you know, order new fittings and, you know, have it here in a reasonable amount of time. I think it was a week and a half to 2 weeks before I got this stuff. So yeah, just going through everything, kind of getting a feel for what it all looks like, how it all looks, and just marking it all off on the order sheet. Yeah, like I said, I really like this stuff. The only thing that kind of annoyed me is there was no sticker to go up on my cabinet doors. I tagged these guys on Instagram, on my Instagram, and they said they'd send me some stickers, but they never did. They probably realized I'm in Australia, or I'm in Canada, they're in Australia, and they're like, it's not worth the postage to send it. So I'm just gonna put some hardware away that I got. This is all part of having a shop, is putting materials away. I think I said this before, but I'm kind of on the fence on keeping this sort of stuff on here just because it's not really correlated. And here I am going back and checking through some of the AC stuff again. The reason why is I'm gonna put the bulkhead connector together. So that right there is I believe a number 6 bulkhead connector for the air conditioning, and I believe that is the number 10. So if I recall correctly, I'm going to have a number 10 is going to be suction into the air compressor. Number 6 is going to be the feed from the condenser, which goes into the dryer, and then the dryer goes into the hits the expansion valve into the, I want to see the evaporator. And there I'm attaching some dash 8 on the engine bay side and barb on the passenger compartment side fittings. This is a really nice unit. I do like it. I'm just trying to figure out where I'm going to put this in the car. I got the heater box in there. I need to make sure it's not, it's going to be in the engine compartment, because obviously those electrical connectors are in the fender well. Yeah, just sorting out where I'm going to put this, where I'm going to cut it, and kind of what makes the most sense. Just kind of looking at this, so in order to hold this onto the firewall, there's 2 almost like clips. It's got a 3/16 stud off of the firewall grommet, then there's 2 aluminum kind of like C clamps, and the studs that they sent with this are just way too short. I think they're like a 3/4 inch stud, and with them fully tightened you can't even get the nut barely on, let alone getting that installed with the firewall in between. Yeah, so I'm just gonna pull the heater box out, and you can see I've taped out a roughing, a rough template that I drew up. That's another thing, there was no template for the bulkhead connector. It wasn't available on the website, didn't come with the bulkhead connector, so I actually drew that in CAD myself, and so I'm just marking it out on the firewall, and that's where I'm going to install this bulkhead connector. You can see there's patches from other stuff that was in the firewall before, and I'm just going to cut through those patches. And after the car's built and running and tested, I'm going to pull everything back out. I'm pulling all the wiring out, all the interior, everything, and I'm going to go through and do all of the body work on the car. So I'll fill all the holes, I'll grind all that stuff down. There's going to be a ton of work I'm going to have to do after everything's kind of fitted and tested. So what I just did there is I'm getting some of the wiring out of the way. I know I'm going to be grinding and cutting in the engine bay, so I'm just getting wires out of the way. Yeah, so I got some new parts in, and I always like to go through my parts as soon as I get them to make sure that there's nothing broken or wrong with them. And today's no exception, so we're going to go through parts. This came UPS. This is, what is this? Oh, this is my Mighty Mouse catch can. So brand new catch can. I didn't need to buy this yet, strictly speaking, but I did. It was on my mind, and the way the Canadian exchange rate is going right now, I kind of like to get my parts as soon as possible because the price of everything is going up and up and up. So I have that. I don't know where I'm going to mount it in the car yet, but I can just throw it on the bench for now. LMR, so this is going to be some electrical stuff and the bolts for the front accessories. So yeah, so that's a pigtail, wiring pigtail, and headlight. I got a headlight switch, I got a headlight pigtail, and then I got I think another pigtail, but I can just throw this in the car for now. Yeah, so that's the bolt kit that I need to mount the air conditioning air conditioning bracket, and then buy proxy the procharger tensioner. And in this classic auto air box, I got my brand new sanden air conditioning pump. I got a air dryer, and I think my trinary switch is in this box. So I'm just gonna go and pull all that stuff out and check it all out, make sure nothing got damaged in shipping and all that good stuff. Yep, that is a fine looking compressor, if I do say so myself. Don't need it right at this exact moment in time, so I've thrown it back in the box. Alright, so maybe you just saw me grab that box from LMR that has all of the fasteners for the front end accessories. So the reason why I need this is because the procharger pulley tensioner mounts off of the stock hardware, and the hardware that I got with the water pump is those socket head cap screws, and the procharger tensioner is not going to work with those, so I got to pull those out and, you know, pull the bracket off, and we're going to start installing some of the original style hardware, but this is chromoly hardware out of LMR. Really nice stuff, not cheap, but really nice. So you can see that fastener that I just put in there, it's 5/16 on the back side, and then it's 3/8 stud on the front here. And that's what I need. So I'm not cranking these down because I don't have a gasket in between the water pump and the timing cover, so I don't want to crank anything down, crack anything, or, you know, do any damage, but I can snug it up a little bit. I think what I will likely end up doing is using all of the LMR hardware everywhere I can. The alternator bracket will have to use different hardware just because of the way it mounts, but all of the water pump hardware, all of the timing cover bolts, I haven't replaced any of those yet, but those will all get the LMR hardware, I think. studs in place, I can put the air compressor and procharger bracket and procharger back on and start seeing how this is going to look. As we can see, the procharger outlet is now in front of my engine plates. That's because I've swapped out from the Team Z engine plate to my own head-mounted plates. So this is going to work just fine. And with the LMR hardware, you kind of saw right there that I got the I don't even know what that's called. It's kind of a long nut, I guess, installed on the stud, and so I can yeah, install the tensioner now. At least I can get 2 bolts on the tensioner and kind of get it in place. From this angle, it's incredibly difficult to see, but I'm having a tough time getting that top bolt threaded in with the spacer. There's not much to bite in. Yeah, so I'm not sure what's going on there, but it's on for now. It's good enough. So right now I'm just trying to figure out where some of these other bolts are going to go. I don't have the back AC bracket milled down yet. I need to get it milled down 3/8 of an inch. And without having the proper bracket, it's kind of hard to do anything more. So I'm just kind of trying to figure stuff out, but not too hard because I don't want to spend too much time on it. One of the next pieces of this puzzle is replacing the stock 302 pulley with the pulley that came with the procharger. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just going over to the box, grabbing the pulley out, and I'm going to get ready to set that on the engine. Just those 4 bolts to install. I believe those are 3/8 16 thread, something like that. 3/16 sounds about right. I don't remember the thread percentage all that well. Yeah, so I loosened off the bolts and then I used a soft mallet just to break the pulley free. I didn't want to pull all the bolts out and then hit the pulley because I didn't want to come flying off. But same bolt pattern, there's no difference, and so I just had to find some longer bolts because the flange on the procharger pulley is quite a bit thicker, so just some temporary longer bolts. Just snugging up these bolts, not torquing them down or anything like that. Everything's going to come apart and get final retorqued anyways, so not a big deal there. And with the engine plates being on the heads now, not between the water pump and the timing cover, none of the accessories need to get spaced differently, which is really nice. The alternator, where it mounts, is perfectly fine. The power steering pump, where it mounts, is going to be just fine. Otherwise, what happens is the water pump gets with the Team Z engine plate, the water pump gets pushed forward a quarter of an inch, and since that gets pushed forward, that means the AC bracket gets pushed a quarter of an inch forward, which means power steering pump is a quarter of an inch forward, which means, you know, the pulley or the crank pulley would also have to be a quarter inch forward for all of those belts to line up. But since I switched over to the head mounted plates, that's no longer a concern. Alright, shop's a mess. I've got some work done, so it is time to get into some cleanup, and that's what we're going to do for the next little bit. So what I need to do is I need to make some brackets to adapt the sanden pump to the foxbody. Now, the stock air conditioning compressor that comes on the foxbody mounts very differently than this sanden compressor. I did see a video online of somebody who installed their sanden compressor on a foxbody. There's a company that makes brackets for doing just this, and I reached out to the company that sells them, and they were selling the brackets for $200, and I thought that was absolutely ludicrous. So I did not opt in for those brackets. I said, screw that, I will make these myself. And so that is what I did and am doing, in the process of doing, is I'm taking the measurements from the air conditioning bracket, getting the inside measurement, the outside measurement, actually just the inside measurement, and then the hole, the size of the holes. That'll give me, you know, my center line, and then, you know, I measure off the sanden. And if I was smarter, I would have looked up the installation manual and the specifications on the sanden pump, because I was able to find the exact distance between those two mounting ears. But I was kind of validated when I was doing that, because I measured the holes, I measured the space between the holes, and I came up with a number. And then when I looked at the actual schematics, I was only off by, I want to say it was 5, maybe 10 thousandths of an inch, which is, you know, if you're talking engine bearing clearance, that's a ton. But in this case, where you're just talking bolt holes, it's really negligible. So I was actually really ecstatic that I was that close just by measuring with digital calipers and doing the design on my own. But what I'm doing right now is I'm starting to kind of figure out where I want this pump mounted, how high I want the various bolt holes spaced, you know, things like that. You know, I've had that AC bracket that's in my right hand there for, you know, 3 weeks. Well, no, I've had it for a while at this point. I've had those engine plates on there for what, 2 weeks now, maybe 3, something like that. I do not know why I procrastinated so long on getting it milled down. I just don't understand it. All I had to do is make a call, take it down, get it milled. But instead I made my life harder by procrastinating on it. So what that there is a roll of flame retardant paper, and the reason why I got that is I'm planning on doing some cutting inside the car, and while I'm doing that cutting and grinding, there's going to be sparks. So I want to lay this paper down over some of the wiring and some of the components I don't want to get hit with sparks, so that way the paper gets hit, it kind of protects everything underneath it. I really should have bought this a long time ago, and I really should have taped up the inside of the windshield a long time ago. Actually, it might be taped up. I'm not sure if it is or not. It looks like it might be. Maybe I did tape up the inside of the windshield. But if I didn't, I should have. This is a prime example of sometimes I start on a project and then I kind of have to stop because I'm waiting for stuff to come in. So for example, I had drawn out on the firewall where I'm going to install the through firewall connector for the AC and the heater hoses that I got from Aeroflow. I had that template out, I drew it out. But I didn't want to start cutting on the firewall until I had this flame retardant paper so I could protect everything on the inside. Now that I have it, I can continue on this project, and I'm going to start cutting this out. I'm using my 90-degree die grinder on the inside. I think that's either a 2-inch wheel or maybe a 3-inch wheel that's kind of worn down. And I think what I'm doing right now is I'm just checking in the front to see if I have easier access there. Oh no, what I was doing is I put some flame retardant paper down on the engine side as well, because I've got wiring on the front side, I've got some new parts up there, I don't want them to get hit with sparks, so I just quickly threw some paper on the front side as well. And what I'm doing here is I'm changing out that cutting disc on the grinder. When it's a small disc like a 3-inch or whatever, they go pretty quick, but they cut well. Now we got that switched out, we can continue grinding and cutting. The reality is I probably should have protected those electrical connections on the right side of this, but I didn't, stupidly. I mean, I didn't hurt them in any way and it worked out, so it's not the end of the world, but yeah, I probably should have protected them, at least taped over them. So we got the basic shape and basic cutout going, and I need to clean this up a lot more. The die grinder isn't really the best way to be doing this, but what I'm doing is I'm just taking my sanding wheel and I'm knocking down some of the welds off of that old patch that I have. So that was a factory hole. It came into the cabin area and there was a lip around it. So when I welded up the plate, I never ground down the lip or anything. I just left it because I knew I was going to do some body work later. So I figured it's the perfect opportunity, get in there and knock that little seam down a bit. Figured while I'm in there cleaning that up, I'll dress the top patch as well. Yeah, so what I'm doing right now is I printed out another template. I am cutting it out, and then I will attach it onto the engine bay side of the firewall. Now that I have the guidelines cut from the inside, I can put this on the firewall with a fair amount of confidence as to where I need to cut. I'm doing my best to get better angles of the work. You know, as I review these videos, I see, oh, I'm just shooting from the side. You can't really see what I'm doing. That sucks. So now when I'm out in the shop, I'm conscientiously trying to get you better shots and get you, you know, exactly what I'm doing. So as you just saw there, I retraced out the line on the engine bay side, and now I'm going to use various tools to open this out to the lines. So my tool of choice for opening this up is going to be a fairly large carbide burr. These things chunk metal away, but they also throw a ton of small, sharp metal chips. So that's why whenever I use a carbide burr, I use the face shield. I've used safety glasses before, and I've found that the carbide burr like sends chips everywhere, and I feel metal chips going under the safety glass and hitting my cheek and stuff. So now I don't care, it's face shield only when I'm using that tool specifically. If I'm just drilling or grinding, if there's a pair of safety glasses around, I'll use that. But yeah, carbide burr, face shields is the only tool I will use. So we're getting pretty close, and so what we want to do is just, you know, start doing a little bit of test fitting as we're knocking a little bit more out. As I always say, it's easier to cut more out than it is to put material back, so let's just sneak up on it a little bit. So this is what it looks like from inside the car. You know, I got it pretty good. There's a bit of a gap on the outside, but the mounts once I get proper length studs in there, should be just fine, and it should work out all right. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just testing with the actual fittings that aren't going to go in there. I just want to see what it's going to look like. Yeah, so all in all, I think that looks pretty freaking awesome. I'm really excited to have this piece, especially if it works out just as well as I think it's going to. So this is where I'm trying to fit the mounting tabs onto the plate, and it just does not work. You can kind of see there is just not enough thread in order to get any of the nuts on there with this in the firewall. It really sucks, but it's nothing I can do. It's what it came with, and it's just not gonna work out as I would have hoped. I did reach out to them and let them know the issues that I ran into, so I'm hoping that Aeroflow is now including longer studs with this piece. Yeah, so since I really can't do much more with the heater at this point, I am moving over to, these are my off-camera designed 3D printed air conditioning compressor mount brackets. So you saw me earlier, I was taking measurements of the compressor and of the air conditioning mount, and this is the resulting mount. When I 3D print this, it gets printed onto what's called a raft. It kind of levels out any imperfections in the table, and then the part gets mounted out. So right now I'm just chiseling the raft off because that's not actually what I want. It's not a part of piece. It's not a piece of the part at all. So yeah, just knocking all that off. Yeah, so there's the first look. My first reaction was, God damn, I nailed this. And I did, I nailed it. I really don't think I could have gotten that measurement any more perfect. As you can see, the first bolt goes in, the second bolt goes straight in, no issues, no clearancing, no nothing. And as hopefully you'll see here momentarily, this goes right onto the AC mount as well. There's no messing around. No, nothing. So I knew for a fact that even if the placement of the holes in relation to one another wasn't good, I knew that the spacing on the holes themselves was good. So I was super stoked at this point. It was kind of, wasn't my first 3D printed part, I don't remember, but super happy that I was able to kind of mock it up this way. So yeah, now it's time to mock this up. I will put the bracket back on. I will hold it in place with a couple of nuts. And then we're gonna get our first look at mounting the compressor onto the bracket. I'm sorry for this terrible angle. You can't really see much from the side of what I'm looking at. Now when I'm filming, I'm trying to be much more conscientious so that you can kind of see what I'm looking at and not just from the side, because this is kind of a crappy angle, not gonna lie. This kind of sucks. Yeah, so here we are. I started out by putting the bracket on the front, which is wrong, so quickly moved it over to the back. And now we are just trying to get a sense of whether this is the right place for this bracket to be or not. Yeah, I need to grab some washers to space this out a bit, and we got that air conditioning bracket that sits between the bracket and the mounting ear, so I'm just spacing it out that little tiny bit. I'm just using some washers. Later I will eventually get some proper spacers made up for this, but at this point just using washers is good enough. Yeah, so my first view at this, I was pretty darn happy. I'm just using the clamp to clamp the other side, just to kind of make sure that everything is going to line up correctly as far as like the pulley is concerned and the back of the compressor. And I believe at this point everything's kind of gonna work as I expect, at least I'm hoping. So yeah, you can see I'm measuring the space between the bracket and the compressor. Although this is not accurate because I still need to mill 3/8 of an inch off of that bracket. So I don't really know why I'm measuring this out at this exact moment in time, but I am. I felt it was the right thing to do, even though it's really not. So with the way that bracket is designed, there's a bit of a space where one of the head bolts goes. So as you can see, I can kind of fasten it onto the car, but it's not right. It's not its final location. Although now that I think about it, did I need to modify that bracket really? The pump gets its mounting and its positioning off of the front brackets. Yes, I did need to mill it down because the power steering pump sits between the AC bracket, both the front AC bracket, the black one that the compressor is mounted to right now, and the back silver one. So yes, if I did not mill it down, the power steering pump would not have fit. So disregard everything that I said, I absolutely had to mill it down. So with that test bracket printed, I can kind of start to understand where on the car things are not lining up and things are hitting. And so I can start trying to get this bracket massaged into place. But it's going to be a lot easier without the procharger on the bracket itself, because procharger is not light. So pull it off the bracket so I can work on just the bracket on its own. And yeah, so I'm just test fitting, seeing where things are hitting and seeing what I need to do. So that bolt that I just undid there, and I'm kind of screwing in from the back, that's actually one of the bolts the procharger uses to mount. Well, actually, I think both the ones going through the front AC mount are. So I'm not sure why I only brought the one from the back. I'm sure there's a method to my madness, and we'll see why in a moment here. Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure what happened. Some of the video kind of jumps around. But what I have here is V2 of the bracket. So the initial bracket, I felt that everything was sitting kind of too low. So I did up another bracket, and I think I brought everything up 1/4 of an inch just to see if that would make everything better. So let's pull off V1 test bracket and we'll install V2. Again, this is just a shitty angle, I'm sorry, because what you're not seeing is on V1, the bracket on the far side was kind of hidden behind the AC bracket, so I'd be able to drill through and get a solid hold, whereas V2 here is way up and it doesn't make for a nice mounting position. But I do find out fairly quickly that I'm not happy with V2, and that V1 with some modifications to the procharger bracket is much more preferable in my situation. So yeah, we're just gonna do some more test fitting and seeing whether or not this is good, and it ends up not being good at all. tell too well, but we are reinstalling V1, and the reason why is I like it better, and I feel like I can modify the procharger bracket to make V1 work a lot better than V2 did. So the reason why I'm putting V2 back on is so I can do just a little tiny bit of an instructional video and kind of talk about how this did not work, and how it's just terrible and I don't like it and I'm not going to use it. So with V1 back on, I think V1 was back on at least, I'm just taking my old belt and kind of wrapping it around some of the pulleys. I just want to see if we're in the ballpark of where this needs to be. The air conditioning compressor is an 8 rib, I think it is, and that belt's just a typical 6 rib. But again, this is just a very loose checking to see if I'm even in the right ballpark or if something is completely and totally fucked up and I need to fix it. Alright, so what I'm doing there is I have some longer bolts coming through the back. I'm throwing some washers to space it out, and then I'm going to very loosely put the procharger bracket up in place and use those bolts coming from the back to the front as a guide. And what that's going to allow me to do is, with the compressor kind of installed like this, that's going to put the procharger bracket approximately an inch off of the AC compressor with the 2 bolt holes lined up, and that will give me a ballpark as to where I need to modify the bracket. You can see it's kind of over top of everything. With just those 2 bolts on the bottom, I get a rough idea as to where things are going to line up. So what that is that's my acetone jug, and that's a bottle that can hold the acetone and not kind of eat itself up. And I'm just filling it up because I need to use acetone. Acetone, most people would know it as nail polish remover. Really good at removing Sharpie and stuff like that. So when I'm drawing something on with the Sharpie and I mess it up, I just grab a little acetone and it just comes right off. So yeah, so you can see I've got the 2 bolts with the washers at the bottom, and that's holding the procharger bracket off of the air conditioning compressor, and I'm going to be able to trace where I need to modify the procharger bracket. It is cleanup time. The shop is a mess. There is stuff everywhere. I need to use this bench. So let's just put a ton of stuff away. Another thing is, while I'm cutting and grinding, I really don't want the procharger itself exposed. I don't want metal pieces getting into it, so I will throw it back in its box. And there is a lot of cleanup coming up, so feel free to just skip ahead to the next chapter, the next part of the video, once I'm done cleaning up. was a ton of cleanup. Clean up the bench, clean up the shop, but we're ready to work. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to separate the two halves of the procharger bracket. The reason being, I want to use a hole saw on the drill press to take a big chunk out of the bracket, and the easiest way to do that and get it flat, and so I can mark out exactly where I want, is just separate the two pieces. So now's an important part. I'm just trying to figure out the size of the hole that I need. I want to make sure that I'm covering one of the, like the ear and everything else. And yeah, so I've selected the size, and we're going to go get the drill press all set up and ready to go and drill this out. So this is an aluminum bracket. It's fairly soft metal. We chopped through it pretty easily for how thick of a piece that is. And as you can see, my threaded cutting oil bottle is sliding on the bench, and that's because this bench is not very solid. When I'm using the drill press, it vibrates a lot. It's just a couple of pieces of terrible plywood sandwiched together. But for the moment it does. I'm considering putting like a steel top on it. I'm actually considering redoing this entire bench. And making it so that there's nice storage underneath, maybe a drawer for drill bits, I don't know. But it's kind of nice how it is right now. It's just kind of open storage. So I've got like some fans down there. I had tires under there for a while. I've got my battery charger just kind of sits under there. So, you know, pros and cons to building some dedicated shelving and storage. Yeah, as you could see from before we started this, the bench was pretty clean, and after cutting through that aluminum, it is a mess. So I just want to clean it up a little bit. Hey, look at that. I'm giving you guys a slightly better angle. You can kind of see what I'm doing, even though it's really low. But you can see there's that bottom right ear on the air conditioning compressor bracket, and that's what I was just knocking out of the procharger bracket. That's what I needed that big big chunk taken out for. And then you can see I've got those two bolts protruding from the back, and that's what the bracket is going to sit on. That's what I had described before. So there you go. So right now the bracket is just sitting on those two bolts. The ear is taken out, and I'm just kind of test fitting this. So I took all those washers off just so I can kind of push this bracket back a little bit more. Make sure I took enough out of the ear where that ear goes. I did take more than enough. I didn't have to take that much. I could have taken out a bunch less, but I don't think it's going to matter that much. All right, so one thing you didn't see is that there's two top ears on the air conditioning compressor as well. So you saw the two bottom ears. Those are bolted to the car. I do not need the top ears. They're not bolting to anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask off the compressor because this is aluminum. I know I'm going to make a huge mess. I want to do my best to not get any chips or metal pieces inside the compressor itself or inside the pulleys. So I'm just going to tape it all off, mask it all off, and then I am going to go to town on those two top ears. I am just going to take them out, make them look nice. going to start off with a aluminum cutting disc on my die grinder, and I'm just going to cut out the majority of the brackets. I don't need to use the die grinder on the whole thing with a carbide burr. I can start and take out a good chunk of material just with a cut-off wheel. Now that I have the majority of it taken out, I'm going to move over to a carbide burr, and I'm going to shape the housing to the rest of the compressor, make it look really nice, make it look clean. Like if you don't look too closely, you'd probably never know that I modified it. I mean, unless you know these compressors and know that it has, ears top and bottom, then you'd obviously know that I modified it, but it looks pretty damn good, if I do say so myself. And to finish this off, I'm going to use a little drum sander on a drill just to clean it up, take some of the tool marks away, make it just look a little bit cleaner. And then once I am doing that, these carbide burrs and the grinding and everything else, it makes a hell of a mess. So I'm going to do some cleanup. So one thing I wanted to make sure I did while I was doing this is to not fuck up the power cable, and I fucked it up. I burned through it, and you can see the conductor, and so I'm gonna have to put some heat shrink over that before I finalize this in the car. And I'm so annoyed with myself that I did that. I just couldn't believe it when I saw that I burned through the wire after everything I've tried. You can kind of see it in this shot. Right near the top there's a little piece that looks a little skewed, and that's because I burnt through it. You can see the conductor, and I hate myself. I hate the fact that I did that. I hate that I fucked it up, even after trying so conscientiously not to. Alright, so now that we've done a bunch more cleanup, we can start test fitting that back on the car and see if we need to make some more modifications. Yeah, this test fit is looking way better. I just have to modify the top a little tiny bit to clear a little bit more of the compressor, and I think these brackets are going to work just perfectly. Now that I've marked kind of where I need to continue modifying the bracket, I'm just going to modify, test fit, and just repeat that until I get it to a good place. now that we're kind of happy with our test fit, let's clean up the shop a bit. Let's put stuff away. Well, this brings us to the conclusion of our video. I'm just going to look at the work a little bit more. As always, if you stuck around this long, I'd like to thank you for viewing, and we will see you in the next one.